so I'll be filling in for him until he joins.
Perfect. Thanks, Milton.
Chuck is here as well. So looks like we do have, at least I see 20 panelists. Just to make sure all work group members are here, I will do a quick roll call. But thank you for joining us today. This is a work group meeting of the Transportation Policy Council to develop a memorandum of understanding for the North Houston Highway Improvement Project. So the introductions part, I will call the names of the work group members. If you're present, please indicate. Harris County Commissioner Adrian Garcia. I know Milton Rahman is here.
Here. We're both here.
Oh, good. Thank you, Commissioner. And Dr. Carol Lewis from Gulf Coast Rail District.
Yes, I'm here.
Chair Karen Patman.
I'm here. Is there a way we can see people or not really?
So there's a little bit of technical difficulty on the video picture part, but
Okay.
our Greg is trying to see if he can turn on the video
Okay,
part.
no biggie, but just checking. Thank you.
But it's a small work group. Hopefully we all recognize our voices. Chuck Lempo, AGAC.
Here.
Thank you, Chuck. David Douglas, Liberty County.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, David.
I'm very good, thank you.
Councilmember Robinson from City of Houston.
I'm here, Patrick. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Eliza Paul, Houston.
Yes, Eliza's here. You can hear me, right? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Fort Bend County Commissioner Grady Prestige.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Zimmerman, City of Sugar Land.
Yeah, I'm here, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Waller County Commissioner Justin Beckendorf. We'll come back. I did not hear. City of League City Council Member Larry Milliken.
Present.
Montgomery County Judge Mark Keel.
I'm here.
Thank you, Judge. City of Waller Council Member Nancy Arnold.
I'm here.
Thank you, Council Member. Roger Gunther, Port of Houston. I did not hear you, Roger, so we will continue. Harris County Flood Control District, Russ Poppy.
Good afternoon. This is Russ. I'm here.
Thank you, Russ. And our ex-officio Texas House of Representatives, Ed Thompson.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. So we will get started with the meeting. So we did not receive any public comments in writing. So we do not have anything to show online. But I would like to invite members, if there are any members in the attendees, to raise their hand by pressing *9 if you're on the phone, so that we can unmute you to speak. So if there are any members logged in, if there are any public logged in through the toll-free number, please press *9. That will enable you to raise hand and we can unmute you to speak. So Greg, if you can monitor and see if anybody raised hand.
So far, I see Ani has raised her hand.
Okay.
Patrick, as a host, you'll have to unmute her. I don't have that authority anymore.
Okay.
Do you know how to do that?
Okay, I think I unmuted. Ani, can you?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Patrick, and everyone who is in the room. I am Ani Blair from Link Houston, and I wanted to reiterate the points that we've shared. I was unaware that we could submit public comments to today. Thank you for making this meeting be transparent. As we have stated before, that is really important, and being able to share the information for people to be able to join and listen is very important. We understand that you have a big task before you, and I appreciate the reiteration of what the purpose and roles of this particular larger group will be. Going back to some of the comments that Chair Patman made at the last TPC meeting, it is, at least on the outside, difficult to understand what the role of this 15 or 16 person body will be versus the role of the particular signers of the negotiation. So talking through those issues is extremely important. And then, as has been noted many times through TPC from both the HGAC staff and many members who are voting members, we find it extremely important for this group to address some of the outstanding concerns that were very eloquently articulated by Houston's mayor in his letter to the Texas Transportation Commissioner, Laura Ryan. So once again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing the results of this body, and that information is shared widely and openly. This is the first of its kind, and I think that you are paving the way, hopefully, for what will be a groundbreaking way to make sure that community members and elected officials' concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking if there are any other raised hands. I do not see any other raised hands. So we will move to the next item. So we'll be discussing the establishment of work group goals, operating procedures, and decision process. With that, I'll turn it over to Chuck Wimple to give a briefing on that and discuss any items.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everybody. Wanted to take a moment and make sure that we have a discussion on some very important aspects of the work group before we get to reviewing the working draft memorandum that's before us today. Oni Blair just mentioned in her public comment and referenced Karen Patman's questions as chair of Metro during our recent Transportation Policy Council, and I'm sure that others of us share. And that is, what are really the goals of this work group, the process, and how are we going to make decisions as a group? And so I think it's important that we spend some time discussing that as a work group and coming to some agreement, so we know how we're going to operate, why we're getting together, how we're going to operate, what we're going to produce, and are we going to operate as a work group with a lead, or are we going to assign a chair, or are we going to cast votes, or reach consensus, whatever it might be. So it's important that we have take some time today to have this discussion. I would offer up as the work group goals a little bit of, at least my understanding of the process going forward. And the goal of this work group is not to end up with a document that everyone can then sign. It's really to develop a memorandum of understanding to take back to the Transportation Policy Council with a recommendation to then move forward with having that memorandum sent out to the signatories, and that there could be and likely will be additional discussion and negotiation of that MOU once it gets back to the signatory parties. We all know that these things undergo individual review. We are not expecting that the individuals who are representing signatory entities will necessarily be the ones that are able to sign that memorandum. And so it's important to understand that this is truly a work group where we work out a memorandum that can then be taken for a good discussion and deliberation by the Transportation Policy Council, and then issued out to the signatories for additional consideration. And it's important that this memorandum of understanding really focus on the scope of work and what we intend to do over the next period of time, that we talk clearly about roles and responsibilities for each of the parties, expectations. This is really a document to keep us all together at the table, to have an agreed upon process for looking at possible alternatives, for looking at incorporating public comment and concerns, and finding a way to keep that in front of us while also keeping the funding in our region, and finding a way to have a project that can address the needs that are before us from a transportation perspective, and also take into consideration the community needs as well too. So I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to talk about that and be really clear that what this work group will produce is kind of the first step towards getting towards a final memorandum of understanding. As far as operation and decision-making process, the work group has a couple of important decisions in front of us. Are we going to operate with a chair and a vice chair? Are we going to follow Robert's Rules of Order? Are we going to vote to make decisions or reach consensus? Before getting to discussion from my fellow work group members, I would offer up a couple things for your consideration. And that is just merely saying, do we have consensus, can get a little sticky sometimes. And so it might be good to go ahead and vote on important matters to make sure we all understand where we're at. Ideally, we want consensus, but we want to have something that is clear as to how each of the work group members feel. And then if we are going to move towards a chair or vice chair, I would seriously ask the work group to consider that those entities perhaps not be signatories to the agreement, but be others on the work group, just to keep the signatory bodies free in the discussion, and to have a situation that avoids the appearance that one signator may be driving more than others. I think it's important for us to have as a transparent process. So with that as an introduction, I would open it up to discussion from fellow work group members, perhaps starting with the operation and decision-making process, and then whether or not you agree with the goals that were presented or not.
Chuck.
Yes, Mayor Zimmerman.
Chuck, it's Mayor Zimmerman.
Yes.
One, I agree with Robert's Rules of Order. I think we need to be governed by that. I also agree that each one of us on the work group has a vote, realizing that whatever we come up with goes before the full Transportation Policy Council. So this is, as you so eloquently outlined, this is a work group intended to do that, to get at the particulars of what the scope was. The intent was to develop a scope, develop some responsibilities, so that we had then a, more or less a progressive document to move forward. Also agree that it does not, if we decide to choose the chair, that chair should not be one of the signatory organizations, not because they're not qualified, certainly, but only because it might appear then that somebody had more influence than possibly others. I mean, we're all equal, no matter who is the chair. We're all equal parts of a work group, which are equal parts to the Transportation Policy Council. With that, I'd like to suggest, and I have not talked to this person, but know her to be an expert in the field. I know her to be a neutral party. I'd recommend that Dr. Carol Lewis would be the chair if she would accept the responsibility for doing that.
So thank you, Mayor Zimmerman, for thinking that would be something that would be within my areas of expertise. Let me ask a couple of questions about the position of what would be expected of it. So the chair would moderate these particular sessions, correct or incorrect. I'll kind of pose a series of questions. Work with HGAC staff to make sure that the process is moving forward, establishing meetings, that kind of thing, helping maybe to negotiate maybe points that may not quite be aligned at particular points in time, and continue with the list of questions I was asking as someone begins to answer my questions of what that position entails. Then I would kind of pair it with, would there be a vice chair?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for your questions, and thank you, Ms. Zimmerman, for your comments. Just to quickly, if I could respond, maybe from my perspective, we could certainly hear from others on the work group. Dr. Lewis, that's how I would see if we do go with the chair option, would be really to help moderate, the discussion and the meetings, to help work with staff on getting the agenda out. We certainly take care of that, but reviewing that in advance to make sure that we're staying on target with the commitments that are made in each meeting before we convene our future meetings. And then there is always, as we all know, for those of us that have served as chair of any kind of a work group or committee or body, there is a certain expectation that the chair will help perhaps moderate the discussion to make sure all voices are heard during some of the conversation that could perhaps get a bit heated or enthusiastic, might be a better term, as well. So don't see it as much as when you said negotiate, I don't see it being like a outside the meetings necessarily negotiation, but just kind of helping keep the meetings going, and then also report back to the Transportation Policy Council along with Patrick and the HGC staff on how the work group is doing.
Okay, and then would there be a vice chair?
Work group's pleasure on chair or vice chair.
Okay. So if it would be the pleasure of the group, I would say that I would accept that, should that be something people would agree on. I would like to have a vice chair. I will say that I am not an expert 100% on Robert's Rules of Order. I think I understand them well enough to have taken us through 5 years on City of Houston Planning Commission, but I also had a parliamentarian at that time. So if I had a question, I could turn to her and ask, about clarification on Robert's Rules of Order.
Yep, and we'll make sure that is available, so you don't have to rely solely upon your own knowledge.
Okay, all right.
Well, if it's any matter to the body, having served as a member of the Planning Commission when Dr. Lewis was the chair, I would happily second Mayor Zimmerman's motion if that's how I understood the suggestion.
Yeah.
I would like to hear, while we have enthusiasm and support for this, I would like to make sure that we circle the voices of the work group and make sure that the other members of the work group have a chance to weigh in on their thoughts of having a chair and a vice chair. We can get to the vice chair perhaps in a moment, and the idea of it not being one of the signatories and Dr. Lewis filling that role. So I'd like to hear, Karin, I know that Chair Patman, I know that you had some questions about working through this process. Is this getting close to addressing some of the questions that you had early on in TPC and making sure that we're doing this?
Well, thank you for turning to me. Let me say that if anybody has the diplomatic skills to herd cats, it's Dr. Lewis. So I enthusiastically endorse her as chair of this body.
And Chair Patman, does this also get closer? You had questions about making sure that the work group first dealt with our process and that. Does this help address some of the questions that you had going through the discussion we're having now?
My questions really relate to, no, they don't, it doesn't. My question, but I think that I've come around to a different position than I originally expressed. I mean, my concerns were having a really big work group where, you know, non-signatories were represented.
Gotcha.
But I believe we've resolved that. And so I'm comfortable where we are. And I think that Dr. Lewis is the right person to build consensus.
Okay.
I do think we should try, since you've kindly given me the floor, I do think it is possible with this large work group to reach consensus on pretty much everything. And I would hope that we will reach consensus. I think we can. Because as Dr. Lewis said at the last meeting, what we're really agreeing on here are broad principles that are going to apply going forward. And just thinking it through and knowing that this work group is comprised of reasonable minds, people that represent perhaps different constituencies, but all have reasonable minds and are collaborative, I believe we can reach consensus on something.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Chuck,
yes.
This is Nancy Arnold. I agree that we should have a chair and a vice chair. It removes it from being an ad hoc committee to being something a bit more organized and doing some, at least in the spirit of Robert's Rules of Order, conducting the meetings through that process.
Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Arnold. I appreciate that input as well. I'm going, since I can't see others and all I see is the agenda in front of me, I'm kind of going blind. I can't see hands up or anything. So I just want to make sure that we're getting all the work group members in here. Do any work group members feel strongly in opposition to the direction that we're taking?
Hey, Chuck, this is Joe. Why don't you do a roll call and just go through a roll call vote and let people respond that way? That may be the easiest.
Great. So as far as where we're at now, which is we'll have a chair and a vice chair yet to be determined, but just checking in to make sure that we're good on the process now and that our goals are to develop a draft MOU that will go back to the Transportation Policy Council for consideration and then go out to the signatories as well, and that this is an iterative process going forward to keep us all at the table and keep us united and working through what might be some sticky conversations, and that Dr. Carol Lewis be the chair. I would ask, I'll do a quick roll call and you can indicate if you are in favor or not. So Commissioner Garcia with Harris County, as far as where we're at so far, are you in favor?
Yes, on behalf of Commissioner.
Thank you, Milton. Dr. Lewis?
Yes. Oh, am I in favor? Oh.
Yeah, are you in favor of it? Yeah.
I was.
Well, we gotta check. You know.
Yes, I would consent to that.
Okay,
very important role for our region.
Thank you, Chair Patman.
Yes.
Chuck Wimple, myself, yes. David Douglas with Liberty County. I'll have to give a few seconds for the mute buttons to get taken off. We'll move on to Councilmember David Robinson.
Yes, Chuck, that'd be great.
Okay. District Engineer Liza Paul with TxDOT. Are you in favor of where we're heading so far?
I'll be glad to have Carol Lewis to be the chairman of this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Prestige.
Yes.
Mayor Zimmerman with City of Sugar Land.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Beckendorf, have you had a chance to join the call? Councilmember Milliken, are you in favor of where we're at this point or not?
Absolutely.
Judge Keel with Montgomery County.
I like it very much.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes, Chuck.
Executive Director Roger Gunther with Port of Houston. How are you doing with this? Executive Director Russ Poppy with the Harris County Flood Control District.
Yes, sir. No objections here.
Great. And then if Ed Thompson's office or if the Representative Thompson are on the line.
Yes, yes, that'd be great.
We have you as ex officio, but I like to circle the voices and make sure at this early stage where we're at. So that sounds fantastic. There was a request for a vice chair, which is a good idea in case the vice chair would handle the same duties in the event that the chair is not available to conduct those responsibilities and may take on additional assignments assigned by the chair. So Dr. Lewis, a little extra there for you as well too, if you want to think about that. So do we have thoughts on a vice chair for this work group?
What about Joe Zimmerman?
Mayor Zimmerman, I think that's a great idea. Joe, how do you feel? Mayor, how do you feel about that? Sorry if I get a little informal.
Thank you, Karin. I'd be happy to be second to Carol Lewis.
All right, so I was on mute, so I could say that's not exactly what it is, but.
Now, Dr. Lewis, don't forget that other duties as assigned part of being chair to the vice chair as well too. So
No, I understand, sir.
Right.
Joe can take on some extra assignments for the work group. But Mayor Zimmerman, thank you so much for agreeing. Rather than go back through the roll again, I would ask if anybody has strong opposition to Mayor Zimmerman being the vice chair.
Chuck, this is Milton Raman from Harris County. I don't have opposition, but rather just a suggestion that should we have someone with signatory authority on one of those 6 entities be the vice chair.
Milton is suggesting signatory be in the vice chair. I think that, Milton, I appreciate the comment. That could potentially, though, end up with a signatory serving as chair if Chair Lewis is not available, and that would probably be counter to where most people are at. So we could have a little more discussion on that if anyone is in support of that.
I personally think, and I think it's a good idea in many respects, but I really think at this point we've decided we're going to have people that are, I feel more comfortable having neutral people as chair and vice chair, personally.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And this is Eliza. I think I agree with Karen. You know, we don't always agree, but we agree on this point.
Yay. Okay.
We mostly agree.
We're off to a great start then as a work group.
I think a non-signature person as the vice chair probably will serve a little bit better. I think everybody will be on neutral grounds exactly. So right. I think that's good.
Okay, thank you so much, Eliza. I think in the spirit of the original discussion, I would ask if anyone else has strong support for what Milton recommended, then we'll go ahead and move forward with Mayor Zimmerman. Does anyone else have strong support? Sounds like we're going to go forward with Mayor Zimmerman as the vice chair. Since we are voting, I would form that in the form of a motion for Joe Zimmerman to become the vice chair.
I'll second it, Robinson.
Second with Councilmember Robinson. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign, and please identify yourself so we can make a note. Very good. So we've completed our discussion, I believe, unless there are things to talk about as far as how we're going to operate and how we're going to make decisions. And we can now turn to discussing the working draft, unless any other, and I'll turn it over at this point to Dr. Lewis. Patrick Mandapaka is ready to walk us through the rest of the items, and we'll turn it over to you to continue to moderate the conversation, if that is your pleasure.
Right. Thank you all, and I appreciate everybody's vote of confidence here. And as was mentioned by Chairman Patman, I do totally agree that we're going to work to achieve consensus, because that's what's best for all of us. And I think that's what what we all want. So I'm confident too that we can get to that point. So I think that took us through item 4 on the agenda, and we are now up to number 5. Is that correct?
Actually, item 4 will be the review of the draft, and
Oh, okay.
Patrick
So
can,
okay. So
Patrick,
gotcha.
so that completes item 3. We're now on item 4. We'll go through the working draft as distributed, and then can open it up for comments and input after that.
Perfect. So Patrick is going to take us through that.
It's not online. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have, so before I get into this, we made a little change on the settings. Hopefully, if you can switch on your videos. If that doesn't work, we'll move on as we are doing. Great, that looks like that worked for everyone. Wonderful. We circulated a draft, working draft of the Memorandum of Understanding that staff has created with some sections here on the purpose, background, purpose, role, scope, and timeline. So I'll be briefly going through that, and then we'll be, after the review of the initial working draft, we will be opening that up to comments. And then I have also received another work draft with some comments from TextDot. I will be sharing that document as they talk, and then we'll also request comments from other work group members. So to start this discussion, in the document, we have included background on the North Houston Highway Improvement Project itself, the limits of the project, I-45 corridor between from Beltway 8 North to around downtown Houston. And then TextDot has recommended develop this project scope initially with the goals to increase facilities capacity, reduce traffic congestion, accommodate future traffic growth, reduce traffic crashes, improve facilities resiliency from flooding, and create new opportunities for improved aesthetics. And then to talk more about the background, TextDot has developed the draft impact statement and also the TPC's action in July to commit $1.5 million with additional funding of $50 million to support the implementation of priority transportation improvements within the community around I-45 project. And then more history on the City of Houston's led extensive public engagement process, Mayor Turner's letter, and other resolutions are passed by Harris County Commissioners Court in June of 2020, as well as Metro's Metro-Next plan. And then more history related to TextDot's commitment and the development of MOU and inclusion of segment 3 of the NHHIP into the Transportation Improvement Program. And then going forward, segments 1 and 2 to be developed and continue the community engagement process. And then we have outlined here a draft purpose and the parties that will be involved in this Memorandum of Understanding. So the purpose of MOU is to establish a mutual accountability and also formalize parties' commitments towards common goals related to the NHHIP. And also commit to a defined process as TextDot develops these additional design alternatives for segments 1 and 2 to understand the scope of work in more detail and outline the process to engage different parties in that to possibly eliminate and mitigate any adverse impacts and define the timeline for the process, and also to commit an ongoing process for public engagement and participation. So again, this is a draft MOU and purpose, and the parties, as we discussed before, the parties would be City of Houston, Harris County, Metro, TxDOT, and TPC of the AGAC. The scope of work outlined here. So there are some commitments that we have put in here as working draft that pertain to all parties. And then there are placeholders for different signatory agencies to put some commitments from each of those parties. So I have put some placeholders there for each of the agencies. And then we filled out as a working draft Transportation Policy Council's commitments here. So as MPO, TPC's commitments, in addition to some of the commitments that came out of the resolution from last year. So to go in a little more detail on the all party commitments, as you read here, I'll touch some of the highlights of that. So to agree on confirming the common project goals, and also to engage and participate in the extensive public engagement process, whether it's TxDOT or City of Houston led or any other agencies meetings as part of the public outreach activities, commitment that all signatory agencies here will be extending their staff support and actively engage in the public outreach activities, and providing quarterly updates to AGAC's TAC as well as TPC. And also, as TxDOT develops these additional design alternatives for segment 1 and 2, commit all agencies to engage in that process to address any community impacts or concerns. Define a collaborative review process to work together in those additional design alternatives as they develop, to understand a process where mutually agreed methodologies and assumptions are developed, to see how all agencies can be engaged in that process, and address the evaluation of those alternatives. And then also any project components that are outside TxDOT's purview. These can be things like housing, affordable housing, or other development related issues that are outside TxDOT's purview. We are trying to identify the agencies that can contribute, external partners that can contribute to either provide some support or funding or resources towards addressing those type of issues. These can be aesthetical improvements as well. And then conduct work in timely manner so that the project ultimately moves forward, meeting the key milestones, so that we don't lose the funding and resources that have been committed to this project. So those are some common commitments that we have drafted as an initial work draft. And then there are placeholders for various agencies that I would invite through this process to fill those, come back with some draft commitments from each of the agencies. And then, as I mentioned before, TPC's commitments are as long-range transportation planning and transportation improvement program. Through those coordination efforts, MPO will be working with various agencies here to advance this project. And also MPO is committed to providing technical support as well as staff support towards the public outreach meetings and any process that is involved related to this project. The commitments that were extended through the resolution that was executed in July 2019, a commitment of $100 million of Category 2 funds for the segment 2 of the NHHIP. Another $1.5 million towards community planning activities to identify any issues related to addressing those issues and potentially addressing any adverse impacts of the NHHIP implementation. And there are a number of specific measures that were identified or activities as part of the resolution. Those include span from bicycle pedestrian improvements to some landscaping, lighting related to improving community livability aspects, as well as strengthening community's cultural identity and neighborhood cohesion, as well as air quality. So this is another important aspect that has been brought up as part of the community engagement process. So potentially creating a low emissions zone to address air quality issues, and also work towards, through our Clean Vehicles program, to see if there's potential to provide some low emission school buses within the school districts in this area to improve air quality. And also additional $50 million of funding for transportation improvements and any implementation of recommendations that come out of the planning process as identified in the previous items. And then provide updates to HGAC, TAC and TPC committees in the development of mitigation measures and refinement of this project scope as it moves forward. So those are some of the draft commitments from HGAC's TPC. And then moving forward, the initial timeline that we put in the draft is 10 years from the final execution of this Memorandum of Understanding. And then we put some placeholders for signatories here. Again, when work group reviews this and coordinates with respective agencies, you can look into changing these names if needed, but these are the initial placeholders that we have put here. So that is a nutshell of the work group, a working draft that we have put together, staff has put together for the MOU. So with that, Madam Chair, I would like to invite any comments or move to the next item.
So let me ask this as we start commenting to my colleagues. If we could try to start with concepts, I think that there may be some wordsmithing things that people may be interested in as well, but if I could ask us to start first with, is there anything conceptually that is bothersome? And maybe we can take it by sections. So let's maybe start with the first 2 or 3 paragraphs in the background section. Anything in concept that is something that people are not quite sure they want to have in there. Okay, giving people a little time to get their mutes off. Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Rahman from Harris County.
Yes.
I do have a comment on paragraph 2.
Okay.
For the overall goal in terms of where we're talking about TechStar's as a development recommended improvements with the goals to improve long-term capacity for all types of roadway user, including automobile, freight, and transit. And also wanted to see if we should include a goal to reduce single occupancy vehicle uses.
Okay. All right. Let's have that as a concept for conversation. And if you would allow me, let's try to get through the background section, list everything that we want to talk about, and then come back and address them one at a time. I'm going to kind of watch our time as well. So first thing, Patrick, I don't know who might be taking notes for us on the side, but the idea of single occupancy vehicles in our goal statement, and and what I'll call, multimodalism. If I heard you right, Mr.
That's
Wilson?
correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got that as something to have conversation about in a minute. All right. Anything else in those first few paragraphs? Okay. And then let's roll to the next three that we can see on 3 or 4 that we can see on screen. Anything conceptually that we want to talk about there? Okay. If not, Patrick, how many more paragraphs in that first section?
Madam Chair, may I ask it's a little bit of a point of order, just to understand, you mentioned you're watching the time. Are we going to conclude today's session in an X period of time? Because just thinking about all that we may want to,
Right.
then what is the schedule for the meeting, if I may ask?
So we've got an hour and about 10 minutes left. So
Okay, very good.
we're scheduled to end at 4 o'clock.
And a follow-up question, you said that
Yes.
we, or maybe Chuck or Patrick mentioned that we have, as a body, received some language suggestions from, did we say TxDOT? Because if so, I think we will certainly have some ideas and suggestions that we might like to submit if it runs past the hour, that we, so we don't rush to make every suggestion within the time.
Right. So Patrick, the question first was, you have some suggestions for word changes that are not conceptual changes, I guess is the question.
So are you, is the question really about the TxDOT's changes, or we are welcome to receiving additional changes as part of these meetings?
Right.
Well,
So I guess the question, Eliza, is that you about to say something?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just
Sure.
going to address that, since those comments comes from us. What TxDOT does, what we were trying to do, we received the MOU, and we did run through it in pretty detail. So some of it are word changes, and some of it are conceptual changes. So they're both in there. We went into detail that gone into some word changes too, but some of the word changes are also pretty important because it affects, like what I was trying to bring up in this first page, in the very last paragraph there's the term reevaluation that was in that last paragraph. Just use that as an example. So there's a couple of words that are pretty important to us that we don't actually want it to be mentioned in an MOU at this point in time. So we have some word changes for those elements over there, but the majority of the rest of it is concept changes.
Okay. So that we can kind of use everybody's time, I think, in the best way, if we could use the time we have left today to try to address our concept changes, and maybe get all the way through the document with concept changes. The things that are clearly, just language-y, maybe we can put to the side, and perhaps Patrick even send around to everyone to kind of give some comments on, and come back at the next meeting with the things that are more word-oriented.
Dr. Lewis?
Yes, this is Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Lewis, thank you very much. I was also curious as to whether how we would go about the process of providing some language additions. One of the areas, since we've had a lot of conversation about public engagement, and some of that is reflected, I think, in this as I've looked over it. But to ensure that we have that we immortalize some of the feedback that we've gotten from the community and the many public engagement events that have been done, I think it would serve us as a bit of guiding principles to follow, where the public has weighed in on, and to ensure that through this process that we would be mindful of those issues, and I think it would allay concerns of the community, that we're not just making reference to public engagement, but that we're really providing some place in the MOU in the background section, probably like in the second paragraph, where things like recommended improvements with goals to provide long-term capacity for all roadway users, including automobile, freight, transit, reduce single vehicle occupancy usage, reduce traffic congestion, accommodate future travel demand, improve the facility's resiliency from flooding on and off the highway, create new opportunities for improved aesthetics and quality of life for those most impacted by the highway. But I would like to see where the public input has been compartmentalized and categorized. 50% of the users of the community engagement process has said we want to see more hike and bike trails. 80% have said we're concerned about flooding. That really giving life to that public engagement piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can we take that as a suggestion right now and not try to fix it at this moment, but to incorporate that, Patrick, make sure we have that recorded, that we want to see how we give some substantiation to the public engagement components.
Yes, Madam
Chair, could I ask a quick question before we continue on?
Sure. Identify yourself for me, because you're not showing up on my photos. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. This is Representative Ed Thompson.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. My question kind of revolves around is there any precedence for an MOU with TxDOT? I mean, is there a framework, I guess is what I'm asking the question. Is there a framework that might already be out there, or are we, inventing the wheel here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the history behind that. I don't know if there is an MOU that's already been done. If there's a precedence for something like this that we could use as a framework.
So I appreciate that question, because I know what you're getting at is there a way we can sort of streamline this as we're going through it? And I would not dare to suggest that I have the 100% clear answer to this, but my suspicion is that we are inventing the wheel. And we got to this place because of the public involvement and all the comments that the TPC had received about the project and about the sections. So when we got to the point that we were funding section 3, the community, and through the correspondence that we got from Mayor Turner's office and from Harris County Commissioner's Court, was that there was a little bit of reservation in how approving segment 3 would affect segments 1 and 2 when there were still so many questions about segment 1 or 2. So the TPC and TAC response was to organize this particular group to try to address what happens in segments 2 and 1. And so I do suspect that we are creating something new here. And I think we've kind of heard it alluded to, that it is new. And we sort of, this project for our region has been called transformative, because we do sort of expect that this is something a little different than the way we've done things sort of historically.
And Dr. Lewis, if I could just add in, this is Chuck at
Please.
ATC. The current framework that is before you is a framework that has been successfully implemented by HGAC amongst multiple local government parties for the same type of purpose, to keep people at the table during discussions that could get a little bumpy and keep a project moving forward. So while we're inventing the wheel, we already have the mold in place that could certainly be changed, but I want to make sure you understand that certainly we're offering something that has been successful in other arenas to at least start with.
Right. So this wasn't with TxDOT though, because I was answering the specifically with TxDOT portion.
No, that is correct, Dr. Lewis. It was not with TxDOT. So this is new as far as all the parties who are signatories are concerned, yes.
So I guess Representative Thompson, the answer is sort of the doublemint, old-timey doublemint commercial. Yes, 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 and yes.
Yeah.
From both perspectives.
Well, you know, the 610 loop, and that goes back a long time ago. I mean, I remember when the 610 loop was put in, and that was a pretty, I would consider to be a pretty major project in the Houston area, and one that encompassed a lot of different areas of the city. And I wondered if there was anything even back historically that we could possibly look at that you know, would give us a way to work through some of these. But thank you very much.
And I guess what we can do over the time between now and the next meeting is take some looks back, and Eliza in her files and HGAC in theirs, and see if there happened to be anything that mimicked what we're trying to do now to sort of address the issue you've raised. All right, so to kind of maybe take us back to a point where we can proceed. From the first section we have as a major item to talk about is adding the reduction of single occupancy vehicles and the multimodal aspect into the first background section. So if we kind of scroll, Patrick, to, because the comment from the commissioner about the public involvement was it in the scope of work specifically?
It was not in the scope of work. I don't see it in the scope of work.
I think the scope of work, where do we have the, I'm just kind of working from memory here, but.
So the purpose
I think
that as well as the scope of work.
Maybe the second bullet, actively engage and participate in extensive public engagement processes, would be maybe where I think the commissioner is asking for a little more specificity maybe.
Yeah, I mean of the previous work, we're still going to have to do public engagement going forward.
Yes.
But we need to give value to what has already been done.
Okay. All right. So if we could, and I think those are our only sections, right? After we get through the scope of work. So if we could have conversation now, unless someone has something else they'd like to talk about what is your pleasure regarding adding the phrase about reduction of single occupancy automobiles and increasing multimodalism within the background section. Any thoughts on that?
Dr. Lewis?
Yes, Mayor.
Walk me through that, Commissioner, because I struggle with you know, minimizing single occupancy vehicles, which in our region has always been, you know, a right. I don't know how you can restrict that. So I guess how would you envision that happening?
Well, Mayor, if I could just give some perspective, the public engagement has largely resisted widening as a guiding principle, as a fundamental approach, and because if you do widen, more single occupancy vehicles will come, and so I think it is an inherent goal. I think there's some research at the federal level that has been reflective of this, And so I don't know if we can ever prevent it, but reducing it, I think, would be a goal worth achieving, striving for.
Yeah, and Commissioner, I've got no problem with something to strive for. I do struggle with the language that says to, flat out to reduce, because I don't.
Providing alternatives too.
Yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion.
I can work with that.
Okay.
Chairman Patman, I think that's a good way to do it, because you can't, you can't do it by rights. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to convince the public that it's something they want to do.
If we are,
and I was going to add also that I'm definitely we are for and okay with multimodalism. I think that's something that everybody is ready to embrace and all that. So by, I think, adding that, I think it will indirectly actually help with the reduction in the single occupancy vehicle, even though working for TxDOT, can definitely not sign on for that, because that's not a goal that TxDOT is trying to envision, reducing single occupancy vehicle. Our goal, our TxDOT goal, is connecting you with Texas. So I think maybe having the multimodalism kind of replaces that, because we can't dictate what people are going to do. People are going to do what they're going to do. They can ride whatever type of transportation that they want to do. And the other thing, I think also to increase the long-term facility capacity, I think it should be to increase both the short-term and the long-term facilities capacity, because they're both equally important. We have to look at what we have to deal with now currently with the people continuously moving into the region, plus also the long-term capacity issue. So I think they both need to be addressed.
Okay. So if we look at the language in the background section, I think it's maybe the second paragraph, it starts off with the Texas Department of Transportation has developed recommended improvements with goals to increase the facility's capacity. So at that point, I think maybe later in the document, there's reference to long-term, but not right here. But if we're talking about to change the language to to increase facilities, maybe multimodal capacity, providing alternatives to single occupancy vehicles, and then moving to reducing traffic congestion. I know I did a tense change there, but in terms of thoughts, does that make sense to people?
I've got one question about just if agreeing with Commissioner Garcia's point about encouraging multimodal capacity, and I think you got the right language there, Chair, is wondering if this belongs in the background section, or perhaps maybe more appropriately in the scope of work, or somehow thinking about objectives. I know in some of the notes that we have had somewhat internally with the city and thinking broadly about the draft that has been circulated, we had very similar language to that of Commissioner Garcia's suggestion in the first bullet point in the scope of work section. So just trying to make sure, because the background is sort of like, what I like about the way it sort of went down in our first round was it was kind of unobjected to, just as a statement of the history that's got us to this point. And there may be one or two things that we'd tweak on that if we were vetting all the language points, but conceptually, I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Garcia for, all capacity and encouraging multimodal use for the new facility.
Right.
Further to what Councilmember Robinson has said, I realized that you're absolutely right. This is a statement of background. A statement of fact. And so if Eliza and TxDOT can't sign off on what their goals were, that's probably not where it goes. What we're trying to do here is reach agreement on how we're going to go forward. So I completely endorse what Commissioner Garcia said, my suggestion would be in tandem with somebody else who said, does it really go right here? Because we can't really say what TxDOT's original goals in the project were. That's a fact, and that doesn't happen to be their goal. But our goal as signatories to the MOU in terms of scope of work would embrace that. So maybe just a location of the language situation.
I
If
agree.
you'll move it to the first paragraph in the scope of work, then I think you accomplished that, Karin.
Yeah, so I think
Right.
that, yeah, exactly. That point is 100%, I think, correct, and that probably the background section is the background section. So everything we've talked about needs to go forward into the scope of work. So to anyone else who hasn't spoken at this point, if our conversation to this point is leading us to maintaining the background section as written, but taking the points about multimodalism and providing alternatives to single occupancy vehicle and moving that down to the scope of work. I can't see exactly which bullet it goes in, but I know for those who have spoken, I think we have concurrence. But for those who haven't spoken, do we have, are there any other thoughts on that?
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I think that single occupancy vehicles, that's something that it's just really hard to regulate that in any way. I think we make some suggestions. We move this to the background. No way does this need to be some kind of directive because TxDOT can't sign off on it.
Okay, Patrick, can you do this? Can you scroll this down? Because I think I'm wanting to basically say that we've got concurrence on leaving the background as is, and then rolling to the scope of work.
Madam Chair, this is Nancy Arnold.
Yes.
And I agree with the comments, and Commissioner Garcia's comments are well taken, that they do belong in the scope of work, because background is just another word for history.
Right, exactly.
It just tells what has happened to get us to this point. So scope of work could certainly be expanded.
Thank you.
I can work with that.
Okay. Others? The rest of our committee, I'd like to make sure we hear from everyone.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Ed Thompson again. The commissioner alluded to federal language, I think, in one of his comments about, is there something in, in federal transportation that provides some sort of definition that at that point could be incorporated into this so that it does give TxDOT then yes. We're talking about quite a bit of federal money here in this project. And I don't know that, having some of that language in there doesn't give TxDOT a little bit of a soft landing when it comes to this document. So, and I don't know what that is. I'm certainly not, I'm not saying that I know it. I don't know if the commissioner knows.
No, what I was referred to, Representative, Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I was just simply saying that I'm aware that there are some federal studies that have been done reflective of some of those respective goals of reducing single vehicle occupancy and things of that nature. So maybe my staff can help to find those particular studies, and then we can just make sure that they're reflected as sources for some of the.
And I'm not speaking for TxDOT. Don't get me wrong, but I just when you made the statement, Commissioner, I thought that might be something that would
help them
give us some value in this statement.
So I think, Representative, your point is if we have something that we could hang that request on, that it would strengthen it.
What we're talking about, yes, ma'am. What we're talking about right now is, in my opinion, very, very broad. I mean, it's it's like up to interpretation. You know, anyone can read it and interpret it
Right.
however they want to interpret it. If there is something out there in federal language, if you will, that gives us something that is a little more defined, I think that might be of value in this. You know, just putting some words on the paper, I don't know that that's what that doesn't accomplish, I don't think, what the body would want to do, and leave it up to interpretation, because 5 people can read it and have a different opinion about.
So I hear what you're saying. I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying. What I could offer as a bit of background is, I think if and I had intended to do this today and just ran out of time, but if you go to the HGAC TPC goals that we've established in the Regional Transportation Plan and our 2045 plan, I think we do have a goal in there that has us moving in this direction. Well, I don't want to try to cite what it is, but I do think we have a goal, and between Patrick/Chuck, we can go back and look at our 2045 goals for the region, I think, and find something that would provide the backdrop, I think, against what you're asking for, Representative Thompson.
Madam Chair, this is Larry Milliken. Before we leave the background area, I believe that Eliza or someone threw up on the screen a red line version of what TxDOT wanted to see in this memorandum.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious is that there were some items in there that Eliza started to speak to and didn't get to finish. And I was concerned if maybe we could give that red line version to the committee, or look at that red line version as we go to maybe get those points ironed out a little bit before we just moved on to the scope.
Sure, I absolutely appreciate that comment. Let me give you a couple of thoughts about it. Is that this is the one from TxDOT. I feel certain the City of Houston has a similar document. I don't know if Metro does as well. So I worry a bit. You know, at school, we have dissertation committees. You got 4 different professors giving the student feedback, and sometimes it, doesn't intertwine. So on that point, I'm 100% happy with the committee getting what Eliza sent so that we can all look at it. And maybe simultaneously, Councilmember Robinson, I think you alluded to the fact that the City of Houston also has something similar. I think I heard you say that.
We do. It's a list of changes. It's a marked up Microsoft Word document.
Right. So I'm open to people's thoughts about how to do that. If we, sort of either put them up side by side. Chairman Patman, do you all have something? Did Metro go through and do the same kind of thing?
We don't, because frankly, we're probably going to be okay with most all of this language, if not all of it.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's just perfectly excellent and captures pretty much what we need to do here. And bearing in mind that
what they're doing is they're talking about expanding.
If someone could.
I'm sorry. I just got, but here's the bottom line. If people today want to go through them side by side, I don't think there's going to be much controversial in them. And so that gets into the language issue you're talking about, Carol, as opposed to concepts. That having been said, though, it might well be that we could knock out a page and a half in the next 45 minutes of wordsmithing. Because, for example, looking at TxDOT's, changing it the way it is from deficiencies to don't meet current standards, that's just better language, what they've added. And so I think most people that have taken the time to wordsmith this, they probably come up with improvements that don't change the gist.
Right, exactly.
But you and
Tara, I'm sorry, I just want, there is one word on the first page, in the background page, that I just want to bring to everybody's attention is at the bottom of the page. It's really just the term reevaluations. There are certain terminologies that we really do not speak of until our environmental process is finished, is complete. There are really two words only in the whole entire documents that we saw. The first one is the reevaluation, and the second one is alternatives that has been repeated about 5 times in the body of the language. And those two words really is just absolutely what TxDOT cannot live with. That's not something we can live with. It's not just a word screen. It's something that would could jeopardize our NEPA process. So I just brought those two up.
And that's further to Representative Thompson's point about, we've got to take into account these federal laws and aspects of this. And we certainly don't want to jeopardize that. And if we're using something that has a term of art in the NEPA context and could mess that up only because it's talking about something that if a different word could be used, we certainly should use it.
Right. So I think what you had mentioned, Chairman Patman, is a fine approach, because I kind of suspect that we've gotten out sort of our major concept things right now. So if we go back and let's take the document that TxDOT sent over and start at the beginning of it. And if I could ask you, Councilmember Robinson, to pull the cities do you have the cities to the side? So as we go through, just kind of paragraph by paragraph, you could.
I'm not sure I have that technical capability right here, Director.
May I ask a favor? Can somebody send the TxDOT changes around to all the staff too? Because, for example, Tom Lambert and Tom Jason are listening in, and they would like to see these too. So that they can text me and tell me what to say. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we'll have.
I can try that.
We'll have someone on Patrick's team send that out. And then Councilmember Robinson, if you could forward yours to Patrick, he might be able to pull them up side by side on the screen.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
One thing that we haven't discussed, and I appreciate the work to find a good place for some of the outputs, but we have not talked about defining the previous community engagement and the response in the respective categories of concern or interest. And I think that is, I think the background is a very, very square place to put that.
So
you could put a paragraph in there on the community engagement and the robustness of it and feedback from it and all that. I mean, that is appropriate. That is part of the background of this. In fact, really, it's
that's why
significant parts.
That's
of the
why that is why we are here, quite frankly.
Right.
So if it works for you, Commissioner, if we could just allow text HJC of Patrick, if you all could work. I think Adam, I saw Adam's name on too. If you all could work to craft that paragraph to indicate the robustness, the intensity of the public involvement, all of the interest that we had that,
and really what the feedback was. I mean, I think, although it's of a great volume, we can put down a percentage of where the concerns and where the recommendations, the community recommendations are at. I think those could be.
But let me ask you this, Commissioner. Do you not think those are reflected when we talk about Mayor Turner's letter and your letter to?
We're, quite respectfully, we reference Mayor Turner's letter quite a bit. But we've done really very little in respect of that letter. And so I'd like to see the input from the community placed, there, because the community has really spoken, and you're right, we're here because of that community engagement. But we have not yet made good turns based on the letter that I co-signed with Mayor Turner, and so I want to make sure that if we have to get to those goals in some way or manner, but the letter, unless we regurgitate that letter and what that letter says into the body of this document, just saying that Mayor Turner's letter is out there, I don't think does the community any good.
You know, I think we could all get there on a paragraph on, you know, the robustness of the community engagement and the fact that, you know, the community really came out and cared about this thing and cared about certain changes. That's history too, as Councilmember Arnold said, you know, background is history, and that is part of the history.
So I still would ask, does it make sense to ask HGAC to sort of craft that paragraph for us, and then kind of maybe even pulse around so that we can look at it before we come back together again for our next meeting, and take what we heard through our multi-hour meeting the first time the community came and the second time, and I think plus they've submitted comments in writing. So I think those can be shrunk and sensitized, I guess, into the paragraph, like Chairman Patman is saying. Okay, and then we'll have a chance to come back and revisit that as a committee of the whole when we reconvene.
Madam Chair, Marquillo here.
Okay, excuse me just a second. I hear a female voice in the background, and then Judge Keogh will get to you if you don't mind. Let me, because I think I've heard that voice before, but it's not strong, so it's not coming out.
So I'm sorry, Kara, this is Eliza. I was just going to point out that there is a paragraph, the second to the last paragraph, and I know Commissioner Garcia probably want more extensive information. There is a paragraph that talks about the City of Houston led an extensive public engagement process, and it mentioned the mayor's letter, and it also mentioned a resolution with the Harris County and all that. Granted, we did redline it partly because it was very confusing the way it was drafting over there. It has a lot of information in there, but it was just not very clear who's doing what type thing. So there is some information over there, and maybe they can just expand on that paragraph. That might help.
Exactly. I think that would be the place exactly where it would go. Judge Keogh?
Well, I was going to ask Commissioner Garcia, are you looking to put in something like actual quotes from people? Are you looking to, we have a survey, or so many people have written in, 80% of the people have written in, want this, 20% of the people want this.
I mean, that is the community. You're right, Commissioner. That is the community feedback that we have gotten. And I think it's important to quantify the fact that we've done community engagement really doesn't, I think, resonate in a document like this, but really showing that through the thousands of people who participated in the community engagement to this project. X said they're concerned about this, X want to see more of that. I think it's important to compartmentalize that input that we've gotten from the community.
Well, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just recognize me whenever.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure, that's fine.
I guess my feeling right this second is everybody's right. HGAC should draft something and circulate it. And in fact, obviously, I think we're going to do this for the whole document, but everybody's red line should be circulated by the next meeting so that we can all look at them. And because I have some questions. I mean, I was curious, and now I understand it from Eliza as to why those last two sentences were taken out. They made sense to me. But the bottom line is, I can see your point. But if we can have some language that then we can chew over about the community involvement process and the concerns that were expressed, I think that would be really good. And then we can noodle on it.
So Patrick, is that something we can ask you all to kind of get together for us?
Yes, Madam Chair. And also we have sent TxDOT's comments, the document that I have on the screen, we have emailed that to everyone just now.
Okay. All right. So we will all have a chance to chew on that over time. Did I hear another voice that wanted to get a comment in?
I started to say something and didn't. So I'll hold if you thank Dr. Lewis.
No, go ahead.
Somebody identify themselves, because I can't see everybody.
Was the last person who spoke Judge Keough or someone else?
Yes, I think it was, I started to, but it seemed like there was another voice. I don't want to walk over someone else. But if it's okay, if I could make just a comment, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eliza, the amount of things that we could put into this in relationship to whether it's the scope of work or the background or whatever, help me with that. We don't want this to be a laborious document. We have a statement here that talks about public engagement process, which, by the way, is in our last, if you recall, in our last meeting, one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Lewis, was one of the reasons why we're doing this is because of input, and which kind of was what generated this this group for the Memorandum of Understanding. So we really have that to start putting in continued statements from whether it's individuals or 50%, 20%, what's the sampling? It creates a lot of questions. TxDOT is, in this document, has really provided a pretty good statement, in my judgment, and keep it as simple as we can to get this deal done as quick as we can. Help me with that. I think, and I certainly respect Commissioner Garcia's position, because I want to recognize the people that have been involved in everything we've done as well. And I think it's the right thing. I'm just not sure that in this document, going into that depth, is that necessary for what we're trying to do?
So I think Mark, you are correct. I'm sorry, Carol. I was just going to. I think you're absolutely correct, and I was just thinking. I mean, if we are to go into listing all the comments and all that in the background section and everything, then we probably also need to list the 10 years of effort that TxDOT has gone through on this project too. So, I mean, so where do we end there? We've done 10 years worth of work on this project before this facilitations and meeting and all that. And I think, all those need to be recognized too. I don't want to go there. I think it's excessive. I don't think we need to go into that.
So let me round this out, please. Let me round this out here if we could. Let's round out with allowing HGAC to craft a paragraph, and let's look at it. And then once we look at that paragraph, that gives a little more definition to what kind of summarizing what came out. Because if someone were to pick up this MOU and never have been at a meeting with us, they would not know what the citizens had said. They would not have seen the mayor's letter. So I do think there is some value to iterating what the synthesis of comments that we are sort of responding to. So if we could let HGAC take a stab at that, all of us will get a minute to look at it, and then we can come back and conversate about it a little bit more at that time. All right, so I think that'll help us to kind of at least take a step so that we can move a little bit more forward today, if that works with everybody. No strong opposition. Yes, Mayor Zimmerman.
Just a thought. We should keep the MOU, I think, is as clear and brief as we can, but maybe a way to capture the thoughts of the commissioner, Councilmember Robinson, is to reference attachments that could be included. That speaks to your point. Should somebody pick it up, then they can clearly understand what the intent is, which is the basis of an MOU. And then the background piece could be in an attachment that could provide further clarity if someone wanted that. That's just a thought.
Right, I think that's a thought as well. All right, so if we could advance from that, if you all, I think we've talked about this for a while, and I think we've gotten, lots of opinions out that are, all valid and are real important for us. But I think we've got a point where we can move kind of forward. And I think if we could, to take what we've got on the screen now redlined and see if we can at least get through the first page and agree on what Eliza has sent, and things like the language with the refinement that we can change that, and then kind of at least know that we've gotten something we can give ourselves a big tack mark for today.
I'd like to pick up on what Mayor Zimmerman just said. I think we haven't shared the notes from the city yet, but I think there is one point where to have attachments as reference documents is part of our suggestion later in the draft that's been circulated. So something that speaks to the important points of the background related to the community engagement that is relevant to this process and what's brought us to this point, I think is as critical as the points that Eliza and TxDOT are making about statements, accurate statements supporting the whole premise of being where we are. We are looking to provide a document that's deep and reflects the importance of all this. So I think we're eager to share our notes as well. It's just not in a form that's sort of ready. And I'm looking at the technology. We wouldn't have time to read it. So I'm eager to send it around to all members. Okay,
that will be on our to-do list.
But David, you don't have anything on the first page. Do you accept to parrot the paragraph that Commissioner Garcia is talking about, and that's going to be redone anyway? Aren't we?
We've talked about that being in the scope of work, I think, but I've just, I think just a couple of words.
Yeah, because I mean, my view would be we can agree with all of TxDOT's changes, recognizing that there's going to be a paragraph we're all going to have to noodle over on that HGAC is going to draft, and your stuff is going to be subsumed in that. I'm seeing and suggested changes because I have seen yours. And then we certainly don't want to mess around with the NEPA process, and so we don't want the word reevaluation in there.
I agree completely.
Okay, so if we can scoot back up, I think, Patrick, have you taken us to Eliza's first edit?
Yes, so this is the first edit.
Okay, so if we could all take a second with that one. Takes out numerous deficiencies and changes and has elements that do not meet current. Okay, I think, is that fine? Does anybody have any issue with that, or can we kind of nod our head and say, yes, we'll accept that change? Okay, I'm feeling like we got some head nodding going on. All right, scroll down for us, Patrick, if you will. All right, the next paragraph, as Karen just said, we're going to do some noodling. I'll tell you all, for purposes of this, if you all want to just call me Carol, I'm okay with it. Because I might slip and call Karen, so I'm okay with it. All right, so let's go to the last paragraph. And again, the language that Eliza mentioned, the evaluation causes issues. So I think the continued refinement is perfect. Head nod.
I just have one question of historical clarity, I think, Eliza. Is it a matter of fact that TxDOT has not done a reevaluation before, or did that happen on the Katy or not?
It just happened. It happens after we got the ROD, so we don't want to talk about it before. That's just a technical issue, with us. I mean, it's just we're just particular about that. That's all.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Okay, good. All right, Patrick, scroll us to the next page, please. All right, so now we're under the purpose of the MOU, and I do think this is important, and we had kind of skipped down to the scope of work. So we now have about 24 minutes. So if we could get through this section today, I would consider that awesome. So let's start with the purpose of the MOU, and then for the whole group, just looking at the first two bullets and making sure there are no comments from anyone on the first two bullets.
Can I just add a little bit to let y'all know what we did over there? The last two bullets there are really the last two bullets in the scope of work. It's the same exact language. I don't think we've changed anything, maybe for a very minor added. It's that same exact two things that was at the bottom of the scope of work, and we just think it should be under the MOU. So if y'all can just look at that first, maybe that can help speed it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I raised my hand, but I've talked a lot, so other people are entitled to talk before me.
Well, if I would, Madam Chair, this is Larry Milliken.
Yes, yes.
That was posted for our discussion group today already has those changes in it.
You mean the ones that Eliza had made?
Yes.
Okay, the one I saw, I don't think it did.
Well, the one I pulled up and printed today and highlighted for my own purposes already had those changes made.
Okay.
Yes.
You're kidding.
Yeah, I'm saying the same thing. Mine didn't, but that's okay. We're gonna roll past that. That's okay.
Well,
so
no, wait a minute. I don't understand.
How he got that one without, because the one I had the commit to the defined process for review of additional design elements. So if I could, Eliza, talk through why that one comes out, please, in your request.
Which one? The bottom two? Well, let me just go through everything.
So
I think the third bullet is the
what
one.
was the third bullet? Commit to a defined process for review of additional design alternatives for segments 1 and 2, including reducing or where possible, eliminating or mitigating identified adverse impacts, and define a timeline for this process. So I understand about the word alternatives, but just in concept, what was wrong with that bullet?
Yeah, the alternative is an issue. The other things that we don't think we can commit to is there's really not a defined process. We don't know what it is. So to say we are going to commit to something that we absolutely have no idea of what it is, I just don't think we can do that at this point in time. And then also you have a line over there that say defining a timeline for this process. And as you know, a lot of the segment 1 and 2, especially segment 1, we don't have funding for that job. I mean, it's not in the UTP. So granted, we are going to try and do everything as quickly as possible. We want to try and make these decisions that affect the corridor probably in the first 2 years. You know, we're hoping we can get everything ironed out, you know, in the first 1 or 2 years. But to ask us to commit and sign for it, saying that we're good with the process and we're good with the timeline and we're good with the alternatives, I mean, TxDOT just can't do that at this point in time. Maybe later on we can, but not right now. So what we have changed it, really is modified it, is with the next bullet is what we have changed it to. We're committing to an ongoing process of public engagement and participation in a transparent manner throughout the course of the project. So the timeline, we're committed to doing all that throughout the entire course of the project, but we just cannot commit to the additional alternatives. Well, the word alternatives go out, and we can commit to the defined process and the timeline.
So let me ask you this, just starting out of the gate, and then obviously we have, you know, a number of other people to hear from. But what was important in here to me was that the MOU wants the commitment of mitigating the adverse impact and, you know, really sort of reducing where possible the potential impacts. So if that part comes out, I don't see that ever replaced. So that just, you know, kind of off the top for me.
Yeah, that part is really not, we don't have problems. We could add possibly part of that back in,
Okay.
you know, where eliminating or mitigating. I don't think that is as critical as asking us to commit to a process, commit to an alternatives, and commit to the timeline.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other thoughts? Other folks on the committee?
Chair, it's actually included when you look at several parts of that sentence. They're actually included in the scope of work in two.
Well, I realize that it's in the scope of work, but in the purpose of the MOU. So I guess to my mind, the reason we have the MOU is because we want to see that. I think that's part of what, I'm one person, but as one person on TPC, part of what I want with the MOU is the concurrence that we are working to. It's almost like one of our primary goals is to address the impacts and all the things that had been communicated through everything we had heard.
Can you put in there then work with the other partners or agencies to develop design alternatives for segments 1 and 2 and finish it?
I think Eliza has an issue with developing alternatives, right?
Yes.
So,
and I was saying we may be able to do that after the environmental process is done, the first part of it. We may be able to develop concepts after that, but not before, not at this point in time.
So Eliza, could we commit to, if you took out everything from a defined process for review of additional design alternatives for section 1 and 2, could we commit to reducing or where possible eliminating or mitigating identified adverse impacts? Could we take all of the middle part out and put that bullet back in with the phrases including reduce?
Yes, I'm sorry. We may be able to do committing to an ongoing process of public engagement and participation in a transparent manner, or where possible, eliminating and mitigating adverse impact throughout the course of the project. Maybe we can add that, you know, to do something like that.
Okay. All right. So Patrick, I don't know, did you get that? We're going to lift the phrase including eliminating or mitigating identified adverse impacts and put that with the bullet on committing to an ongoing process.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I've got a comment at some point.
Okay. All right. Is there any, I'm going to call on you in just a minute, Karin. Is there anyone else who feels like they'd like to say something and you haven't really been engaged as much as you'd like to? Let me offer that up, please, first.
Definitely.
And then hearing no one. All right. Chairman Patman.
This issue may be one of the most thorny, if not the thorniest, we face in this MOU.
Probably.
Because it's where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. We obviously want to be sensitive to TxDOT's needs about language. But as you pointed out, Madam Chair, the reason we're here is the issues over segments 1 and 2 and the elimination or mitigation of identified adverse impacts. So while taking out unnecessarily harmful language to the NEPA process is important. One thing we don't have moving forward is information in the form of studies and evaluations of what we really can do in terms of the footprint, in terms of all sorts of issues. And without an alternatives analysis, you don't have those studies. So I just raised that. I'm really concerned about reaching a resolution today. I guess we can come back to this next week on the wording. But I do think the concept of design alternatives is part of what people really want to see in the community. And the second thing is, just while I have the floor, the last two bullet points added in green, I personally don't think belong in the purpose of the MOU. I think they may be, we want to do this, but the purpose of the MOU is not to conduct work in a timely manner. That has nothing to do with the purpose of the MOU, in my opinion. So that's going to belong somewhere else. And the second to last one probably belongs somewhere else too. So those are just thoughts. But that third bullet point, I think we've really got to have a lot of understanding of that, and and leave as much of it in as we possibly can without blowing up the NEPA process.
I'm going to pause for others to comment after hearing what Chairman Patman had to say.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Commitment to a defined process in terms of how we're gonna react to the citizens' comment is definitely important here. So I do believe it's crucial to look into the alternative, and as Chairman Patman mentioned, that's the sole cause of this MOU, that we need to listen to the citizen and the impact we're making here. So if we don't have some sort of commitment that we're gonna have a process from TxDOT to how we address the citizens' concerns, then I believe it defeats.
So let me say that I hear that, and I understand what you're saying. By the same token, I understand what Eliza's saying. So what I hear her saying is, how can you commit to a process and you don't know what it is? Right now, we can't say what the process is. None of us know what it's going to be. We know we're going to have a process, but we can't say what it's going to be. So we're asking TxDOT to sign, really any of the parties, quite frankly, the city or Metro, anybody else, to sign to a process, and you don't know what, and you all at Harris County, signing to a process, and you don't know what process you're signing to. I think what we're really trying to intimate is that there is going to be this ongoing and continuous public engagement. And I think that point is made below, and that everybody's going to participate in it. And I think that's what we're trying to get across here. I think the references to segments 1 and 2, quite frankly, the entire MOU is about segments 1 and 2. We don't ever say that. So I don't think we have to put segments 1 and 2 here, because that's what the entirety of the MOU is about. But I guess, Eliza, do some thinking about how can we, because you all are going to craft refinements to the baseline alternative. You are going to do that. So what wording could we use here to, I guess, get that point across? Maybe it is refinements. Maybe it's commit to refinements, and then leading into what we're talking about.
Don't you have to do alternatives analyses anyway as part of phases 1 and 2? I mean, once you get to that, isn't that part of the process for that, or no? Because again, this is a critical
Karen,
issue.
The process of doing the alternatives for segment 1 and 2 had already been done years ago. Okay, it did. But what I'm also saying is, we are going to, I'm going to use the word alternative, even though I shouldn't. We are going to look at the alternative. You know, we will do that. In fact, we're doing it already, okay? But we just can publicly say it at this point in time.
Could you say options? Could you say options? Commit to a defined process for review of additional options. Could you say that? Anything.
I mean, the key is, and you are doing an environmental process for that picture, one snapshot in time. That's the environmental process for that picture, okay, which is the baseline of the job. So anything, options, you can call it alternative, you can call it option, you can call it refinement, you can call it anything that deviate with that, compromise the environmental process. The whole key of the environmental process is to get this picture approved and then move on to the next step. We can go into the, I'm going to use the term again, which is wrong, reevaluation and alternatives and all those things.
Right,
But
I get it.
before we get it, I can do nothing about it. My hands are tied. You know, even though in reality, we're working on it. We look at the, I mean, we're doing all that stuff already, you know, but we just can't sign any paper or we cannot say we're doing it.
So I get it. So if I could say it another way, Eliza, what you're saying is once the document goes in, that document has to remain essentially from the technical official standpoint, that document has to remain as is until the record of decision is granted. At that point, then one can move forward and make adjustments. But if you make any adjustments before, if it looks like you're making any adjustments before, then it in essence invalidates what you sent in officially, sort of.
We run the risk. I'm not saying
run the risk. I get you.
We worked 8 years to do this. We don't want to run the risk to get rid of it, basically.
So, okay, so I'm gonna, again, take a breath. And I think if it were, I'm just gonna say this because it's true. If we were around the same table, this would be so much easier. But we can't be, obviously. So I'm gonna take another break and ask anyone who, you know, is on the committee, has any thoughts about anything that we're talking about right now. If you have a thought from a second ago because you couldn't get your mic unmuted, go ahead and offer that now. We're at 3:54, so I want everybody to make sure they've had an opportunity to express what they're thinking.
Dr. Lewis,
Yes.
I think that in the spirit of what Eliza is saying, in the scheme of things, this document should be streamlined enough so that it can get done. And as you go along the way, you know, for instance, when you're talking about commit to a defined process for review, additional design alternatives, are you talking about design build? Are you talking about how they go about building it? Are you talking about what the roads will look like? I mean, what specifically does that mean? And getting them to commit to either one of those things, given the terrain and whatnot they're doing, it would just seem to me we could just make this so simple by going with them on what they're intending to do, and you know, tweaking some, you know, just by their existence, they're eliminating or mitigating and identifying adverse impacts. I mean, they do that when they're doing their construction already, it would seem to me.
So here's where I think that is probably a little less than we need to do right now. And it's that the people who are most affected by the project don't necessarily agree or feel confident that that's going to happen, right? So I think that the point that we're working toward now as a TPC is to show that we've heard, you know, what's been said to us, and that we're, you know, we're opening the room, so to speak, and being transparent and giving ourselves an opportunity to kind of walk through this with all the folks. And so it means while TxDOT's, you know, the sort of the foundation of it all, because it's a TxDOT project, the other actors, you know, all the other signers are also parties there too. And so there has to be a little balance, I think, in how we move forward with it, so that, you know, we have to be aware of what TxDOT needs, but by the same token, not lean so far towards making sure that that's as clear as possible for them, that we lose something that we were trying to gain on the other side by having the MOU, if that makes any sense.
Sure. As I was thinking about what Commissioner Garcia had mentioned earlier in the document, that paragraph we were working on, where he wanted to delineate those things, and then Mayor Zimmerman came up with the possibility of putting a sub or an attachment to that,
right?
And possibly something in the element of this as well. Just to consider. We're still going to get a chance to look at it, but I'm in the scheme of things with our trying to. We have listened to the city of Houston. We've referenced that. We've referenced Mayor Turner's letter. We're going to have documentation in additional information and an attachment. And from that perspective, it would just seem that the simpler the better, and that we are being transparent and we are demonstrating that we want to do what the people want just by that stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right, I do.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, I'll be quiet.
No. We need everybody to express all of those, because that's how we are better. That's how we get to our best outcome, is by each of us expressing that, and us kind of figuring it out together.
Chairman, if I could just echo the city's standpoint, I think Judge Keough makes an excellent point. I think as Eliza, with that bullet point that's up there now that says recognize TxDOT's planning and NEPA efforts, there's a lot. As much as we want to recognize the citizens and communities' input and stake in this process, as I think Eliza was explaining, I heard you say once or twice, I get it. And as wise as you are in the matters of transportation planning, I think those of us on the TPC and certainly the citizens of Houston need to understand why that can't be said. So, you know, maybe it doesn't need to be in the front end of this document to load it down with a bunch of technical stuff that's hard to figure. But more importantly, we are committing to that. We're explaining it in the appropriate place. And then we're going forward with an understanding that options, alternatives, all of those synonyms that we're thinking about, we're going to do that together. I think that's where the collaborative process is really, you know, to quote Chairman Patman, the rubber's going to hit the road.
Right, exactly. All right, so good people, it is 3:59. And I think we have made some great progress today. I think we've got our background close to being together. We've got the red line that was prepared by Eliza and TxDOT sent to everyone, so we can all kind of continue to look at that. I think we've talked a little bit about the purpose, but we'll come back to it given what what we've heard. I did hear that as much as possible that we want to have the MOU to not be burdened with all of the things that we all know, but to be as streamlined as possible while getting the points across. And so we've gotten through these points, and then we'll get, I'm sure, another version of this out to everyone. Also, Councilmember Robinson, if you will, somewhere get that version of the city's document to HGAC that will also be circulated to everyone. So when we come back together again, we can at that point actually plan to do some wordsmithing. What I'd like to do also in the interim is talk with Chuck and Mayor Zimmerman about how we get to the end of this, and so that we kind of know that we're going to have 1 or 2 more meetings, and then hopefully have this prepared to get back to TPC at some point. I don't know if we can actually make September TPC, but that would be nice. But it may have to be October, because the big thing that has to happen is that each of the signing agencies has to go through and do their sections that are going to be inserted into the MOU. So we'll talk also, Chuck, about how that happens and how those inserts get forwarded. You all may already know, and I just don't yet, but we'll make sure everyone knows that by the time we have the next meeting. Yes, Karen.
You're on mute, Madam Chair.
I'm confused as to the sorts of things that are supposed to be commitments of Metro. And so I don't know who the person is to clarify. Maybe Tom Jason, who's been on top of this process, has an understanding, but I'm just confused as to what we're committing to in this. We're going to do our best to do a good job on implementing Metro Next and take into account the concerns of the community. And I'm just wondering what sorts of things are envisioned by these bullet points. Maybe the TPC ones below kind of give an idea.
So I could guess, but before I guess, let me see if Patrick or Chuck want to try to answer Chairman Patton.
You know, we did provide the TPC commitments as kind of an idea. We imagine those are much more robust than what the other parties are certainly going to have. They could be quite brief. The ones you just mentioned were great, Karen, in there. And I would ask Patrick to develop maybe a little guidance that could go out to each of the parties that could kind of help define that. And then Patrick, if you want to add anything to that, and Dr. Lewis, you said you had kind of a guess. I'd love to hear what that is too. Yeah.
So, I think
I'm gonna wait on Patrick, and then I'll do the guess last.
I can start with some bullet points. I guess I would say topics such as any planning participation that Metro has already committed to or is going to be committing in terms of conducting planning. The other part is public outreach. So wherever Metro is trying to provide some commitment from Metro side towards public outreach activities, that will be an activity. I don't know if there is any funding participation, probably not, then that will not apply here. And also if there is any participation towards identifying external parties. So if Metro has any partnerships with external parties, external agencies that are not part of this MOU that you can bring to the table to fulfill any gaps that were identified by community concerns, that will be another type of commitment I can think of. So I think that's where I would probably start. And anything
those are really granular. I mean, I think it pursuant to the goal of having just an overall principle. I mean, you know, I just hate to see us all get into these granular things. But anyway, but community outreach, that kind of thing, that's fine.
Yeah, and you mentioned Metro Next and that, you know, so I think that's
Probably good. So, and that was actually going to be my guess. I was going to say, far be it from me to have any idea where we're going to end up with in terms of how the facility looks. There is communication, there is talk of having some online stations. So I would think that if something like that were to come out of it, Metro would be the ones who would, you know, kind of commit to doing some dollars for online stations, or, you know, providing service on the facility if there's, you know, kind of like you do in the other corridors. If there is a, you know, a managed lane, Metro puts service on, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All right. As they say, for the good of the order, is there anything else, Chuck, Patrick, before we are to adjourn and let folks go?
No, you handled item 6, Madam Chair, which was the proposed revisions, talking about the next draft, the work group follow-up for the individual members, and our goals for the next meeting. So barring any other further business, the meeting is yours to adjourn.
Perfect. So since we are abiding by Robert's Rules of Order, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Zimmerman. Second?
Second.
Okay, I heard Chairman Patman. So thank you. We are adjourned, and I'll see everyone whenever the 20th is, next week.
August 20th.
Yeah, that's next week, right?
Yep.
You're right. All right. All right. See everyone then. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you
Thank you.
so
Have a
much
great
for your
weekend.
time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.